and ever-changing views, and computer terminology. Commodore reviews. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you.
Hello and welcome to this special Easter episode of Zapped to the Past. I am Adrian Mills and I'm joined as ever by Graham Raddings. Now normally we look at games that were released for the Commodore 64, but in this episode we're doing something a little different. Today we are going to be looking at some games for the Commodore 16 and plus 4, 16 games in fact, and we're releasing this on the 16th of April. So we have 16 for the 16 on the 16th of the 4th month. So much. It's number alignment it's number alignment that Nostradamus would have been proud of.
He would.
So there you go. So that's what we're doing. Yeah. So we're going to look at a load of C16 games on plus 4, I guess. But so Graham, what the hell was the C16 and plus 4? What was it?
Well, the C16 plus 4, technically the same thing. There's just slight different variation in how they were presented. They were actually designed. It's kind of an odd tale with the C16 really in the plus 4. So basically, the Commodore 64 was doing very, very, very well. You're talking sort of $1 billion in hardware sales around 1983 to 85. No, it was
billion?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was $1 billion worth. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Not 1 billion units. No, $1 billion.
Wow.
But this was obviously Jack Tramiel's great ambition was to create. He was very much a computer should be for the masses, and that they shouldn't be in the purview of rich people or people who can afford them. Contrary to what you might think when you saw the original pricing of the Amiga and the Commodore 64, but that's a different argument. Anyway, so the Commodore 64, so we sort of have to look at the way Commodore was structured at this time a little bit. We're not going to go too far into that, but the main thing is that the Commodore 64 is doing extremely well, and Jack Tramiel felt that there was a gap. And the gap was in low-cost computing. He saw the Sinclair Spectrum as a low-entry computer, sort of for the masses, which is kind of what it was. And he saw that he saw that the Sinclair Spectrum was doing particularly well, not in the US, where it was kind of a bit of an unknown entity, I think, and in other areas, but in Europe especially, and in Britain. He saw that he was losing some market share. Now, Jack Tramiel was all about sales. So marketing didn't really matter to him. He was about sales and unit sales. So if he saw that there was a computer doing marginally better or potentially better for sales in a market he wasn't getting the traction in, he was going to do something about that. And so he set about trying to create a competitor for the Spectrum and to try and create a computer that would essentially sit in a bubble of affordability. So it was meant to be a computer that people could afford to buy as an entry-level computer. And so he and his team created the essentially really a follow-on from the VIC-20, which was the C16 plus 4. So this was designed to be created cheaper. So it took some of the things away that made the C64 really good.
Yeah.
So it didn't have any hardware sprites. And basically what they did is take the VIC chip and the SID chip, and in order to cut down the cost to make this sort of entry level. Remember, the idea of this computer is that people could afford it. So I think it was meant to be sold for around the $100 mark in the US. So probably about the same in the UK, so about £100. And in order to make it that kind of affordability, bear in mind the Commodore 64 at this point was still in the 200 plus, so it's still quite expensive. They basically took all of those functions and put them onto one chip called the TED, which was the text editing device, the TED chip. So this feature was the TED chip. Yeah. Now the TED chip actually ran at 1.7 gigahertz. It's faster than the C64, and the machine was shipped with 16. I was going to say meg of RAM then, but 16K of RAM. Mm-hmm. So it was shipped with 16K. There was actually a later version of it that came with more RAM as well. So you could get, eventually there was actually a 64K version, believe it or not, of the Plus 4. But we won't necessarily dive into all of that. Anyway, so this machine came out. Now the Plus 4 was deviated into the C16 because they wanted to sort of capture the Plus 4 didn't really do very well. And it's because it looked ugly. It had a really weird keyboard, had a really weird naff sort of arrow-based cursor key thing on the right. And it was actually sort of weirdly aimed at kind of a business market in an odd way, or office, and it had built-in office kind of tools. So it had a built-in database, built-in word processors. They're not very good. and it looked ugly. No one's going to want it without getting major hand cramp. You're not going to be able to use that keyboard for very long because it was almost really built to. Remember, this was built to sort of compete with the Spectrum. Now, this is no disrespect to Spectrums, but the rubbery keyboard was never anyone's particular favourite. It's got a sort of people have an affinity because it was kind of our British thing, and it was, it was Sinclair's and all that. But to use on a long-term basis, you're going to get, your hands and fingers end up in knots. So in order to sort of leap onto the popularity of the way the Commodore 64 looked, the C16 was born. C16 obviously was in the same sort of form factor as the Commodore 64. It was a slightly different shell case in colour, so it was darker. And it didn't come with as many component parts. I don't think you could plug some of the peripherals into it as well. And so it was very much a entry-level computer. It had a better version of BASIC than the Commodore 64. The Commodore 64 version of BASIC was terrible. The Plus4 C16 version of BASIC is actually a lot better. So you can actually draw onto the screen, you can do graphics on the screen and all sorts of stuff like that.
You got access to way more memory as well, haven't you, on the Plus4 version? Yes,
you do, because the VIC doesn't sort of take some of that away. Its architecture was a bit more, and if you think about it, it's a bit more like some of the PCs that you see now are just like one chip to rule them all. So the C16 was quite ahead of its time in its architecture, and the idea that you could just condense everything down to keep things cheap and just reduce the form factor. So put everything you can on one chip as opposed to having a separate graphics chip. So the reduction of all of those things left the C16 quite good at BASIC, reasonably fast. It was meant to be that kind of entry level and not really a games machine as such. But obviously, if you dress it in C64 clothes and you enter it into a market looking like C64 but at a budget price, the instant thought of people is going to be games. Because the C64 by this point was dominating the game space. In fact, if you went into shops, it was just all about C64 games. No one really thought about, oh, do you know what? I need a word processor. Let me go and get a Commodore 64. It just didn't happen.
Yeah, the CBM title had long been lost, hadn't it?
Absolutely. So then you ended up with this really weird problem because the C16 isn't compatible with the C64 in any way, shape or form. So there was no way that you were going to be able to make backward compatible games for the C64 and the C16. Not going to happen. So you've got to create games from scratch, and you've got to work in the parameters of what you've got. So you're programming a lot of things by hardware. It's got more colours than the C64. It's got 121 colours. Because it has a much wide degree of luminance colours. So it's running slightly faster. You've got no hardware sprites. You've got a lot of limitations in around. You can access a bit more of the memory in a certain way, but you've got really odd screen modes. It's a bit of an odd machine in all sorts of different ways. Never really knew where it was aiming.
It felt to me more like a Spectrum.
Yeah, well, that's because it was aimed. That's
character-based graphics, colour clash, system on a chip.
Well, it's exactly. It was designed to compete with it. The irony of it all is that it was this was rushed together and put together as the Plus4 package for a big CES show. 2 days after that show, Jack Tramiel left Commodore anyway, went to Atari, and took most of the engineers with him. So they were just left with this device, and they didn't really know what to do with it. So they just put it out. I think it was in less than a year. It was pulled off the shelves in the US, but for some reason in Europe, especially in some of the more challenging economies of Europe, it really sold well because it was a cheap way of getting into computing, and there was a built-in monitor on it and everything.
It was big in Mexico as well, massive in Mexico.
So inevitably, games and things started to pop out on it, and because it was a popular entry-level computer, you were going to get games on it. Now, certain companies seem to push a lot of games out on it. So Mastertronic did quite a lot. Gremlin Graphics have done quite a lot. So when you look through the catalogue of games, of which there are quite a few, there is a varied range of games sort of going between almost home hobbyists pushing stuff out towards the sort of more professional Mastertronic and Gremlin Graphics end. But you've got this sort of, it sits in a really weird cusp, the C16. It was never going to be a computer that was going to take off massively, because if you were going to get a computer that you wanted to hack out and do stuff with, you'd probably get a Spectrum. That was never going to be the Commodore 64's fault. If you wanted off-the-shelf arcade-style gaming straight away, you sit with good sound, your C64 was going to be there. And they brought this out at kind of a weird price, and so you're making people look at it on the shelf thinking, do I want this thing with these kind of games, or am I going to go for the C64 with all of its games, all of its hardware, all of its stuff? And I think they kind of killed themselves with this, because the C64 still had plenty of life left in it. And obviously after after this one, I think it became the Plus4. They did the 64K version of this with weird built-in business applications that never really going to work.
Nobody wanted them. Nobody.
Weird sort of, because you got this weird device, because the back of the C16 is different to the C64, so you have to have an adapter so you could adapt the data set to work with other hardware. And it's just, really weird compatibility things that you would never think of. Later, even some of the weirder versions of this machine had a built-in speech synthesizer, and you just, I know the Amiga had a built-in speech synthesizer, which is often forgotten about, but it's just weird that this would have that. I mean, it's just like somebody somewhere sat in a meeting with all of the various people that put this together. Then a load of them left and went to Atari with Jack Tramiel. So they were like, what do we do with this thing? I don't know.
No one knew.
And no one knew. And anyway,
No.
it didn't die straight away. I think because it got a little bit of a user base, stuff came out on it, as these things do. And, here we are looking at the C16. I never knew anyone that owned one my whole life, ever. No.
So, I knew one person who had a VIC-20.
Yes,
That's before I
same.
had a Commodore, but that was before I had a C64, so it felt like the future when I had a ZX81. But I never saw a C16 out in the wild or a +4.
Yeah, and I think the way Commodore pitched the C16 was that it was a really good entry-level, they called it the learning machine, and they pitched it as a good entry-level machine. If you like the VIC-20 and you want to get into sort of programming, well, this C16's a good step up because it's got a good basic and it's got all of this stuff, and you're like, okay.
Okay.
Not so sure about that. Anyway, you still had two joystick ports, although they were different to the different sort of ends to the usual ones you'd get, of course.
Yay. Of course.
Just usual daft stuff that they would do in that way. But it's one of those. It's a footnote for Commodore, really, but classic Commodore, because this is how they ended up doing, releasing machine after machine after machine that was just stupid.
Yeah.
When
They
you've got
never
the
did
success
anything
of the
with
Commodore 60, the success of the Commodore 64 and the Amiga, you'd think that there would be a company that would be, like IBM hanging around today. You'd think Commodore would be around, but just one disaster after another. Yeah.
Was it Amiga CD,
CD32? Yeah. And then, they created some of the greatest home computing architectures of all time with the Amiga and the C64. Just astonishes me that to this day that even though those machines still exist, obviously, and people do all this stuff like retro, obviously, the whole retro stuff and everything that goes on. But it staggers me that Commodore as a company were outlived by people like IBM, really, in some ways, because they genuinely had a foothold in that market like no other company at one point. Crazy. Yeah. Then you look at the C16 and you go, why did it go wrong?
Oh, that's why.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a very potted history. You can...
Yeah.
Go and there's loads and loads of stuff written about the C16. There's tons of websites devoted to it. I think it's one of those machines that over time has gained quite a little cult following in its own way. And I think because it's it's seen as the little brother of the C64, I think there's even demos and stuff out for it, which really push its capabilities. So as is always the way, people find a way of getting the most out of these machines, and certainly some of ththese programmers for these games did. That's for sure.
That's true. And so there you go. That's why the C16. Why are we covering it, by the way? There was a section in this month's app. There's an eight-page section, and that led us. So there's an 8-page section where they've kind of looked at loads of games. So that's where we picked our 16 from. So this is not an exhaustive, look at all the best games. I didn't even know what the good games. I've never played them, so who knows? I just picked 16 at random. What I did was, when I picked them, there were a number of ports. So there was things like Thrust and Zolix, so I avoided them. We may look at them at another point, but what I've done is I've tried to look at games that were original for the C16 +4, and that's what we're looking at here. So when I say original, that we haven't played elsewhere, not that all these games are original, I'll say that. So there you go. So that's the remit for this. So should we crack in? Should we get on to these games?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. And the first one, okay. So our first one is Auriga. Auriga. So this is so loud.
It's so loud.
Like I had to turn my speakers are like 0 to them. As soon as you added a little bit on the speakers, my partner downstairs was like, shh, turn it down. I was like, I can't. It's either off or on.
It is, and I meant to say actually, the C16 had a two channel sound, square wave only, so a bit like the Atari 2600.
Yeah, so 2 channels, but this is so loud. So this is a single screen blaster, kind of the way that the enemies come on is reminiscent of Spectipede, but when you kill them, they don't create the plants and stuff. So the enemies scroll on in a pattern. You have to destroy them all without dying, otherwise you have to do it all again. You can move left and right. Your ship is pretty big. You can shoot. There's little more to this other than working out when to shoot and learning the patterns. Each level is a different shade. So it really makes use of those 121 colours on the machine. In fact, we'll see that a lot. We'll see that a lot in these games.
Yes.
It's simplistic and harsh, but it's playable. There's a lot moving on screen, especially considering there's no sprites or characters. This was okay, if incredibly loud.
Yes.
But did you?
Yeah, no, I agree. No, I completely.
Auriga?
No, it was like exactly as you describe. The blurb for this, by the way, it says Earth requires highly skilled pilots to form its new space fighter squadron. To be selected to join the ranks of Starfleet, oh dear, you must complete and pass the ultimate test. That your test mission requires you to travel to the. This is a test mission. Requires you to travel to the darkest depths of the universe, traveling through uncharted territories, battling with the innumerable hostile creatures found within, and still return home with your craft intact. That seems more like a. That's more a test. That's more than a test, I think. Really, I think that
is more than a test. Yeah,
that's not a test mission. Would be just taking it out for a spin and coming back,
Yeah,
driving to the uncharted territories. Anyway, it was
that's a lot.
It sounded and played like an Atari 2600 game, which is probably what it was. Very bold, very big, very loud. But fun. It was fun.
It was all right. It was £2 as well from players. Now, we've seen stuff from players. This is better than player stuff we've seen on the C64, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah, they seem to do a lot better on the C16.
Yeah, but C64 was crap. But this was all right. So, yeah, it's a £2. There you go. Auriga. It's all right. If you just want a simple blasters on, let's move on. These are going to be quick. It's like speed dating this.
It is.
Speed reviewing. So, that's what we're going for here. So, Graham, let's move into our next one. And that is Dorks Dilemma. If you like Dorks Dilemma, this is a full price from Gremlin Graphics.
Full price, Gremlin Graphics. When we say full price, by the way, are these $9.99 or are they slightly cheaper? I can't
$6.95. This was. So
okay, so Dorks Dilemma, a space-shattering colonization with a planetoid form not known to any civilized solar system, and dazed and confused Dork awakens to find his disabled spaceship stripped and hidden throughout the underworld kingdom of the evil little Zobwats.
I did not get that from this game.
Dark little creatures living in an underground maze, and they told Dork space travel viruses were supposed to be fun. Or space travel was. It's hard to read the blurbs on these. I put this was a fun, playable flick screen collect 'em up, very bright. Graphics moved quickly. Sound was pretty stirring, to say the least. Controls were all right, but it was just a kind of a flick screen. It weirdly drew everything, didn't it? It kind of showed you the map. I think was that this one or was that a different one?
Yeah, no, it does. The sort of components appear at one at a time.
Yeah, because you've actually got to use your bombs to blow certain things up. A certain number of the things on the screen have to be blown up, and then it releases a part of your spaceship into the center block, and then you have to run off to the right. It's the logic of some of these C64 games is dead weird, but yeah, that's what we have to do.
C16 games.
Sorry, the C16 games. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, so it's a multi-screen maze game reminiscent of Bomberman.
Yeah, similar.
Because you can drop a bomb and it blows up, and if you're in that blast, it'll kill you. You are a thing. I don't know what else to describe you as. You're a ball with a head that pops up now and again.
You're a dork.
You are what you are. Enemies patrol mazes. You got to blow them up. Contact with enemies kill you. It's odd and it's hard to understand. Especially the first one I tried in, which just put me in the first level it dropped me in. I appeared in a part of the maze where there just two enemies appeared at either end, and that was it. I couldn't drop a bomb because it just killed me immediately. I was like,
there's a lot of instant logic deaths in many of these games actually, where you're at the mercy of random. I think
it is, but I did note that this really does look like a Gremlin game. It has that chunky black outline. It looked like Future Night and other games that we've seen from these, from those kind of grouping on the Gremlin graphics on the C64.
Yeah, there's no mistake in the Gremlin games in some of these. Yeah,
so this is, there's puzzle pieces you've got to collect, isn't it? Or some kind of weirdness. There's some puzzle on the right. So if I'm squinting and looking at 1,000-yard stare, it's a weird mix of Impossible Mission and Bomberman.
Yeah, then you've got to edit. You've got to edit the jigsaw as well.
That's what I mean. So that's the Impossible Mission bit.
Yeah, totally.
Not in any other way. And weirdly Bomberman. But it's it's all right. I didn't mind this. It's better than some of the ones we're going to look at. But
it was all right. It's all right. Yeah, and it felt like more of a complete game.
Yeah, there you go. Dorks Dilemma. It's all right. Moving on. Bandits at Zero is our next one. This is a Falcon Patrol Defender style shenanigans as you control a plane over water, killing as many other planes as you can on a daily basis. I like this. It's like my daily job. I just go out and shoot loads of planes. That's my job. It's like, what did you do today? Went out and shot loads of planes. All right, okay. It's simple enough. And that's it, really. There doesn't seem to be much more to it. There's no picking up people or anything. It has got some very nice parallax scrolling on the sea.
I thought that was neat. To
give it some depth. And if you get to the third level, it introduces boats that shoot at you from the sea. And that's good because it adds some much needed variety. It's a little slow to get going. It's a bit dull. It's just, you and your enemies look exactly the same. It could have done with a level skipper or been a bit faster to get through the levels, because the first two are really dull. And at the end of each level as well, your refueling plane comes back up and then refuels you. You have to sort of slow down and sort of fly at the right
That's
speed.
what you call that refueling process. It looked painful.
It did look painful, and just for all that, I shot it down every time. If you do shoot it, another one appears. It's like they just keep sending you them. Please refuel. Stop blowing them up. I wonder how many I could have killed. It was okay. It's graphically quite nice. I think it's got it looked like Falcon Patrol. Yeah. Obviously, but just without that sort of bottom visuals. But the way they did the parallax scrolling, I thought was really nice. And it's quite fast and it's responsive. I don't know whether that's part of the 16's faster processor in play, because it will be. It feels a bit snappier to control.
The processor is 1.7. Remember, the C64 is at 1, and this is at 1.7, so it's quite a bit faster.
Yeah. So considering everything's character based. Nice use of those characters to, they look like sprites to me, whatever it is. It was okay, just a bit dull, a bit slow to get going. But I think if you could have got into the action faster, this would have been a really decent shooter. What about you?
Yeah, nice Defender clone. This was made by Sean Southern.
Oh, was it?
So it's Mr. Chip Software. So it's Sean Southern. He does loads of games for the C16. That guy must have loved it. And hence the reason why, because he also did Kickstart, Speaking, and loads of other Mastertronic games for the C16. So you can see why he's got that kind of Sean Southern kind of polish to the code. So the code and the way it operates when you shoot and your spaceship explodes, you get some nice little animals and stuff, little touches. It's got a night and day cycle for some reason in this game as well. Weird.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. It's your day job.
Yeah, so it's. I thought it was good fun. Like you say, just the 16K started to show, because all of a sudden you sort of felt like you'd run out of things to shoot.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Flying around thinking, have I finished?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
it's just a bit slow. Yeah, but £3 from Mastertronic, that one.
Bargain.
All right, so it's okay.
And the sound on that was ear splitting. It was ear splitting and shrill, the title music for that.
Can we just sort of put that down as actually the next one's pretty good, but that is a thing of the machine, isn't it? It's like aye,
loud, so it's loud and shrill.
Yeah, not what you want. So that's Bandits at 0. Another all right one. These are all right. Yeah, not too bad. Let's move on. Graham, Leaper. What about Leaper?
I quite liked Leaper. I thought it had a nice presentation, really colourful, nice guides and sort of intro screen, so it was quite clear what you needed to do, albeit that was technically almost impossible. Nice. The music was all right. Wasn't so loud. It was a reasonable rendition of the Can as the title music on this. And then in the game, it was Popcorn, or sort of a version of Popcorn, so it felt quite. It played to the strengths of the game, so it wasn't overwhelming you with blasting your eardrums with these sort of oral headache-inducing sounds. So the game is quite simple, wasn't it? Jump through the gaps and sort of make your way up to light the lights at the top. I quite like this one. It's one of my favourite ones I played. It was dead simple, dead annoying and infuriating. But at the same time, I quite liked sort of my time playing it. It was just easy on the brain, I think, and because it didn't sort of try and drill my skull with music, I thought it was all right. It's a bug bite game written by M.J. Gannon with additional graphics by M. Donnelly. I thought this was one of the nicer looking ones with its nice sort of intro screens and multi-screens, and it just felt a bit more complete, I think. What about you?
Yeah, I really like this. I mean, it's a version of Jumping Jack.
I thought it was. I was going to say there must be a game behind it.
Yeah, so it's Jumping Jack on the Spectrum. I mean, which in itself, it's kind of a Frogger style game, isn't it? Where you're kind of leaping, where you're moving that sort of, whether your view down is from the side or whether you top down, it's that view jumping up the screen on platforms and things to get to the top to land on something. So it's that Frogger mentality, which Jumping Jack is, and this is. I liked it. I thought it was really good. Probably one of the best ones played so far, and they've all been pretty decent. But this was at first I was like, what the hell? Because it takes a while for gaps to appear in the line above you. But it's and it can be frustrating when you just jump up, drop down, jump up, and you have to sort of play. Yeah. But then you start to get your head around, right, actually don't jump up at your first opportunity, and you start to learn a little bit of strategy, and it's all right. And if you start to light up those lights at the top, it's a simple thing. You just want to see your name in light, so get to the top and turn them on one by one. I thought this was maddeningly pretty good. Although it does feel like a lot of the time you're just watching lines with holes hung go across the top half of the screen whilst you wait, doing very little at the bottom.
Yeah, there is a bit of that, but I think it's a simple logic applied to something and done in the best way they could do it, and it sort of works kind of okay.
And it does, and it's better than the Spectrum one that it's based on. It looks a lot nicer. I like the animation on the main character. I like his little idle animation as well. And he's just stood there, sort of
a little attention to detail in Leaper.
Yeah, so that's really good, and it worked because it looked like he was just sort of popping up and down to Popcorn. That
yes,
tune.
it did.
It's actually a decent rendition of Popcorn.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I say the music in it wasn't making me want to sort of scream and run out the room. So that's a good start.
I'll throw my speaker at the wall and jab pencils in my ears.
Shout, make it stop at the top of my voice.
yeah, Leaper, best one so far. It was good game. A nice little game. This I enjoyed that. Quickly move along. Did you enjoy Kung Fu Kid?
No, I didn't. This was the first one where I felt terribly underwhelmed.
Yeah,
I think it's just. I mean, there's not a lot. I ain't got a lot to say about it. It was an utterly crappy walk left and right, punch him up, and it was really badly done. The sprites just appeared randomly. So he had a really determined walk, which made me laugh loads. And your sprite was way better drawn than the enemy sprites, which were just kind of these blocky splats that just when you punched them, the sort of went, and flew backwards. It made me laugh. It made me laugh loads. I thought it was this because I don't know if you've seen the tape case for Kung Fu Kid, but I'll send you the link to it. But honestly, it ain't great.
Oh yes, I have seen that. Yeah, it's all face and limbs.
Yeah, so my feeling is it might have been drawn by a young kid or something. Maybe the game was made by a younger child. It didn't seem to have a lot of game logic in it. It just figured they'd got something working, and then that was all there was to it. So I thought it was out so far. I thought this was a bit rubbish. So.
Yeah, I think this is where we see what the machine doesn't do very well. It's a really substandard clone of Kung Fu Master in it.
You're not kidding.
I mean, because it's walk left to right, they scroll on that kind of a bizarre mix of character styles in resolution. Considering it doesn't have sprites, I don't understand why some are high-res single colour and some were blocky. I don't know how the system works.
Why wouldn't you just reuse the same sprite as you, but did make it different colour? Because they really well animated his walk. He had a really stern, forward-facing walk. It made me laugh.
Yeah, it did, yeah. But they're really flickery as well, the enemies. And it's just terrible. Yeah, this was really bad. Substandard gameplay. When I look at it, if I look at it now on the screen, it actually looks like it could be okay in a still image. The UI at the top's quite nice, but then playing it reveals a flickery, unpleasant experience.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of that. Make the screens look good for the the box.
Yeah,
and you'll probably sell a few. You don't have to sell many of these. Think about it to make a little bit of money. So
no, you don't. And this was another Gremlin graphics one. Won it for $6.95 according to the case.
Dear me.
So
Gremlin signed off on that. Goodness.
Well, anything. I don't know. It seems like there's lots of games for the C16, but
but they were probably thinking, if you bought a C16, this is what you're going to get.
This is what you deserve.
You're not getting Kung Fu Master, you're getting Kung Fu Kid, and as we'll see later, licensing is out the window with this machine.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. There's no sense of proprietary or.
At least with these games, I mean, there's a lot of games that obviously we haven't looked at, like you said at the start. It's unfair to judge everything by these few games because there are actually some really good conversions, but this is the non-converted stuff. This is the bread and butter. This is the bread and butter we're looking at.
Yeah, it is. And so far it's been all right, but we've found one with a bit of mold on.
Yes, absolutely. We have this was the bottom of the toaster underneath the wires. So you have to get it out with a wooden spoon.
It
was clogging the toaster. This one.
Let's unclog it and move on to our next one. Megabolts. So this is a confusing game. I thought a confusing maze game that sees you moving from screen to screen in search of what I presume are the Megabolts. It's fast, but it's almost too fast. It's hard to line up with the exits and entrances, as everything is just a character wide. It's all too easy to overshoot the gaps, so to move, within the maze, and the enemies that prowl the maze will kill you before you get lined up properly. This to me looked like a Vic 20 game.
Yeah, similar.
And I'm sure I did play something very similar on that machine. I found this was average at best. I found it a bit twitchy and not particularly enjoyable to play. And also, I found it random in that I would go from screen to screen, go back, and I'd be in a different maze. I couldn't make head nor tail of the actual layout of the world. So Megabolts was not something that really enamored me to the machine or to playing it. I found this just a bit ugly, and this was like the character graphics where everything's a character size. There's no it just stunk of VIC-20 to me.
Yeah.
But you.
Yeah, this is by Stuart Cross. So this is another Mr. Chip software game. The idea is actually in this, you've actually got to crush and kill the characters you've got to kill the enemies in it by crushing them between the maze blocks. I don't know if you realise that.
No.
So in fact, the object of the game is to clear all 64 screens of that, of the invading Megabolts. There are 2 ways to dispose of the little chammers, but we're not going to tell you either of them. Great instructions. That's from the instructions. Discover the methods of mayhem by experimenting, but watch out for the time bombs dropped in your path. Run over them to defuse them. Anyway, the object of the game was you had to it was a bit like a weird, crappy, tiny version of Pengo, and that you had to sort of crush with your X, because you're a little X, an animated X, and you have to crush the objects. But in all fairness, it's that small and bitty, and it didn't quite work. And like you say, you end up dead for reasons, just for reasons. So I didn't enjoy this at all. I thought this was too small and bitty and mini. I don't like one character objects. It is very VIC-20. It reminded me of a game called Escape MCP on the VIC-20, where you're being chased by the letter M in a very menacing way. Not like that either.
Actually, that might be the one I played. I think my friend had that. That seems to ring a bell.
You're running around a maze trying to escape from an M.
We've all been there.
We've all been there.
Okay, Megabolts. Yeah, didn't do that. That didn't do anything for me. We're in a bit of a lull at the moment. Let's see if our next one can pull us out of that lull. Guzzler. It's a bad name.
Oh, dear.
There's a name that hasn't aged well. Did you get on with guzzling, Graham?
It's a Pac-Man variant, for want of a better description of this. I put the title screen is a flickery raster bar nightmare of epic proportions.
Yes, this is that one, isn't it? Yeah,
where they just explode all of the 121 luminant shade of colour by blasting them to your eyeballs in a kind of dazzling display. The game has nothing to do with that. It's running around a maze, picking up keys to collect fruit and avoiding the baddies. So you got to move Guzzler around the maze, avoiding the Frobblies who patrol the corridors by picking up a key. Then for 50 points, which will allow you to enter a food cell and guzzle the items of food inside. However, having eaten them, Guzzler becomes fat and cannot enter some of the narrow passages. To become thin again, he must wait at the maze borders for deflated Dennis, who will deflate him, enabling him to get another key to the food cell. After 4 food cells are emptied, bonus Barry will appear with the current Guzzler bonus letter on his front. If you catch Barry, you've received 2,000 points. Extra points are awarded if you complete the world. Barry dies if hit by deflated Dennis, by the way. Guzzler can defend himself by using a time bomb to stun the Frobblies for 1,000 points. You start the game with 5 bombs and gain extra bombs every 3 screens. Guzzler dies if hit by the Frobblies. Most people die to get hit in the Frobblies, I tell you.
Especially after guzzling.
Bloody painful experience. Or if you contact deflated Dennis and you get too thin, or you can blow yourself up with the bombs. It says, good luck, happy guzzling. Yeah, I didn't like this at all. It was weird, and it felt like he was just running around a maze, and it was really weird because the logic of getting too fat to get down to get the other keys meant you just had to wait around for deflated Dennis, and he never seemed to show up when you needed him, so not very good.
No, I didn't like this. Another maze
Andrew
game.
Chalice was the person behind that, published by. That's a player's game, by the way. That one.
It is, yeah. Andrew Chalice, he did Into the Eagle's Nest, didn't he?
Did, yeah.
Yeah, so that's quite interesting.
There's some names behind these games.
I know, yeah. But this is slow and flickery and not a great experience.
No, the raster bars are epic.
The sound is pretty non-existent. The visuals are nothing to write home about. The title screen is also a thing of horror and epileptic nightmares, and there is no reason it should look like that.
No, and they're not stable rasters, by the way, raster bars, which I imagine are quite difficult to do because there's no VIC chip to stabilize them, so they're just a timing nightmare.
It's just horrific. But yeah, no, Guzzler it's not good. I didn't like that. It was like a sort of more restrictive version of Mr. Do.
Yeah, and we'll come to a sort of a variation of that later as well. So.
Yeah, we will do, yeah. Anyway, there you go, Guzzler. Moving on. Killapede. This is another one from Andrew Chalice. Completely random as well. I listed these out. That was completely random. So it's a Centipede clone through and through. It's a little bit juddery. It could have been smoother with character graphics and doesn't feel that smooth, but it's certainly playable and looks and feels enough like Centipede for the C16 that this would scratch that itch. Sounds okay. Yeah. It looks like Centipede. I mean, there's not much more to say. It is one of those games that you got in these early days of, thingy. It's not Centipede, it's Killapede.
Yeah, it's very similar to your. It does. It's exactly like it. No, it's not though. I see. That's a Killapede. You've got to learn to be more observant when you're looking at characters.
Absolutely. I'm I'm an ichthyologist, or whatever they're called. I know about insects and the like. I can clearly see that is not a centipede.
No, that is a
There's no such thing as a killapede. Ah.
See, now that's where the expertise comes in. So I'm an expert and you're not. Let's just go from there.
Yeah.
Like you say, nothing more to say. It controlled okay, very dull, really, compared to some of the other games we played. So, and it sounded like an Atari game again. So
yeah, this was Centipede. So there you go. Let's moving on. Street Olympics.
This game had me in hysterics. By the way, just telling you now. I was laughing. Laughing for ages at this. Because I like the events. The events in this are my favourite events of any multi-event game we have ever played.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of there being a 2-meter sprint. I particularly like the 800-meter jog. The long distance run combined with jumps. This is what they labelled them as. And throwing. Just throwing.
Just throwing. It's Street Olympics. This spoke to me on a level that I wasn't prepared for, because this actually felt like things I did as a kid.
Yeah. Well, you went for an 800-meter jog.
We would do decathlons and stuff when I was a kid. Yeah, just running around the estate.
Yes.
So this weirdly spoke to me as like, this is Council Estate Olympics.
Yeah, and it doesn't take Einstein to figure out that if you're going to create a game with multi-events, making those events based on the exact same logic. Yeah. Yeah. So this 200-meter sprint looks a lot like the 800-meter jog. Now it's very different. It's 4 times longer and a slower speed.
Absolutely. And to jump it, it's like, well, most of it's just the same as the jog. But then you jump over some bricks, which is exactly what we would have done.
Yeah. The good old sprint, jog, jump, and throw events are very, very few and far between. I always feel there should be more of that in the Olympics. Just call them what they are. Don't dress them up with fancy titles. Just a decathlon now. This is sprint, jog, jump, and throw. This is totally gotta keep up. Come on.
You remember them? I did think, though, ironically, that I thought the visuals were pretty nice in this.
Yeah,
what they were. I thought the main character is really well animated, considering it's all characters.
Yeah, it's a big old thing,
It is. He does one thing. He runs.
He does, at different variations of, speed.
But the jump is quite nice as well. And the parallax scrolling. Right. Yeah, the parallax scrolling in the background was quite good with the houses and the clouds and stuff.
The housing estate he lives on, yeah.
Yeah. It's weird. Yeah, as funny as this was, as basic as this was, as silly as this was, it really did take me back to a point in my life where we was 12 years old doing weird decathlons around
around the estate. Yeah, around the estate. Yeah, that's what it did feel like. It did make me laugh.
Yeah.
When you start the race, you don't get a start flag or anything. This weird balloon face floats on and speaks to you. I was like, what? Yeah. Why that? Why did you do that?
Well, that's because again, took me back to my age when we had old Balloony, who we called him, who would call out the races. He wasn't very good, sort of thing.
Why wouldn't you just have the word "go" or ready, set, go or something? No,
because
none of
clearly
that.
You're not familiar with Balloony that we had on the estate.
Well, I'm thinking that that this is again something that needs to be quickly introduced to the Olympics. Never mind having the official with a gun,
Balloony,
just a balloon with a face drawn on it, and it just pops.
This was the thing is, the game itself is, you're going to get very bored of it very quickly, because it's just it's just the same thing 3 times and then lobbing a rock. So there's the lack, and it's all waggle-a-thon, so there's very little to entice you back. It's not even like the events end. It just stops and then you start running again, slightly slower. And
the most confusing way to select events I've ever seen, because you select, you've got an A game and a B game. The A game, you can compete in all the events. The B game, you can choose by pressing F1 or pressing F2, and then after that you then press F1, F2 or F3 for the individual events, for 1, 2, 3 or 4 respectively. But it doesn't work that way. It just kept changing you back to the A game or B game. Why do it like that?
I don't know. I found this strangely endearing, but a bit dull.
Yes, I think it's the same Mastertronic game. It was coded by Patrick Strayson, I believe.
Yeah, there we go. Street Olympics, fun little diversion.
That made me laugh a lot. That game.
a trip down memory lane.
Yeah, it's more like Council Estate, challenges, I suppose.
Yeah,
really,
it really was. That's what I loved about it. You just called it that. Council Estate running. It should have, when you threw the brick as well, it should have gone through someone's window. It really should have, just for that added
There's enough people out there who could redux that game. Get on with it. Off you go.
Yeah, you should do. So let's leg it out of that estate into Xargon Wars. Did you enjoy Xargon Wars? Struggling
Gremlin
which one that was.
graphics. It was a Gremlin graphics shoot 'em up. It was similar, actually, in some ways, to Gunstar on the C64. So the graphics were kind of had a little bit of a look of that.
Oh, yes.
And you had the energy bar on the right-hand side thing. Ship looked okay. It looked like you were shooting side-scrolling sperm, but all right, that's what it is. It's some kind of weird game like that. But it was difficult and boring. The blurb for this is a battle spectacular in the classic mold. These descriptions on these games are hilarious. Defend your mother planet from the alien hordes. No, it doesn't say what your planet is, just your mother planet. Put to test your skills as gunnery commander as the space invaders launch wave after wave of laser bombs. With your nerve last out and reflexes quicken, as each success you attain is met by an even faster attack the following level. No, it's Space Invaders-ish, wasn't it? Kind of weird Space Invaders where the invaders were kind of side-scrolling sperms that dropped eggs, little mini eggs on you. It was weird.
Yeah, I didn't get much of a single-screen blaster. Slow and chunky movement. It felt to me like one of those Tomitronic handheld LCD games.
Yes, yeah, exactly that. And I think that's exactly where the logic had come from. I don't think
because the way they moved, especially that second level with the yellow birds, they kind of moved. You know what I mean? You get the sound moving that staccato way.
Almost like there's a place for them on the screen and they just kind of appear there in that place.
Yeah, like LCD games.
Totally.
For something similar, I'd recommend that Auriga game, which is similar in things come on from the left and you have to shoot them in a single screen and move on. That was way better.
It's all it says you've got defend your mother planet. No description to why this is the Xargon Wars at all anywhere. Just that's what it is. Just what it is.
It's a word. It's a word that sounds slightly sci-fi.
Puts you in right in the bottom right hand corner of the shelf, doesn't it? That
it really does. Yeah. All right. Next one up. Rescue from Zylon. So this is really good. I thought this was really good. You pilot your airship-like craft through numerous caverns, rescuing trapped people. Simple flick-screen hero-style game that is really good with really nice controls and animation on the main ship. Multiple screens and some tricky. It's like Fort Apocalypse and things like that, isn't it? So, multiple screens, some tricky places to explore, make this an enjoyable experience that belies the machine it is running on. Clever touches like being able to choose sensitivity of the controls are also good to see. It's good to see. I thought this was interesting, clever, and really well made. It's got my thumbs up. Best one we've played so far.
Yeah, same. When you find yourself deep in the mines of Zylon, rescuing the geologists that have been trapped by rising floodwater, I thought it was quite good. You've got your airship in there. It reminded me of a lot of other games. In essence, it's really that one of those sort of wire around the loop maze games, isn't it? In essence, it's one of those. But not to like about here. The animations, graphics felt complete. There's loads to go at as well. There's 28 geologists in each level, and there's 8 levels. So you've got hundreds to rescue. It takes you for hours.
Yeah, this has got to keep you going, isn't it?
It's very difficult, but I thought it was playable and graphically inoffensive. It was good, actually. So yeah, best one we played so far. I quite enjoyed that one.
Yeah, I mean, if I'd have picked this up as an early sort of C64 game, I'd have been well happy if it picked this up for as a budget $1.99 title. This would have kept me going for ages. Was it a budget one? I don't think it's from Gremlins. It's £7.
All right. Yeah, it was all right though. You'd have had it's plenty to go at with that. I mean, all the rescuing them. Some of them are real challenges to get to in those mazes. So
yeah, they are. And it's just a good, well thought out, well made game. Good stuff. Recommend that one. Go play it.
Yeah.
Rescue from Zylon. A few left. Monkey Magic, Graham.
This is from John Shea at Solar Software. Now I suspect, and I could be wrong, but this is based on the Monkey Magic TV series, which is actually a retelling of the classic Journey to the West tale. It's almost a folk tale, really, in those realms. But this turns that into a weird side-scrolling shoot 'em up where you can fire directionally for some reason. So you can fire sort of weirdly in all the sort of compass points, and you're attacked by waves of enemies in it's a basic shooter. You're meant to be Monkey on his cloud, but I think they've borrowed the Monkey Magic and all the sort of look and feel of that. It starts with a weird monkey head shouting Monkey Magic at you in text. And I've said it looks like the lead singer of The Verve massively. Is it Richard Ashcroft? It looks exactly like Richard Ashcroft with a gold band on his head. But other than that, the game itself is
The
naff.
drugs certainly did not work for him. I can say that.
Well, it says
Looking
it's
at that
according to
picture.
this is Quest 1, by the way, because there was sequels planned for this. So this was just Quest 1 of several, and it says on the box for this, Quest 2 is coming soon. So in Quest 1, you've got to join Monkey on his first quest in search of the Holy Scriptures. This involves a long and perilous journey on his magic cloud, high in the air, with the aid of his magic stick. I think he's got a better name for it than that. Monkey battles with the evil creatures of the universe. That's that. That's the end of that. I think it's sort of, I mean, that's summarizing Journey to the West in a way that I've never seen anyone do ever so well. I mean, that's like all of the nuances of the, the trippy tacker and all of the various things and the fights and all.
You don't need them.
You don't need that. It's just a monkey on his cloud hitting things with sticks, which you don't do, by the way, in this. Even though you've got a stick, you actually shoot things.
Yeah.
You'll be pleased to know this was coded in 100% machine code. That's always something that's nice to see in a cassette inlay. So, no, I thought this was rubbish, and a crappy tie-in that people who recognise Monkey would go, oh, it's Monkey Game, and then get it and go, oh, God, why did we buy that? And who's Richard Ashcroft? So,
why is he in my game?
why is he shouting monkey magic at me?
Don't know.
Drugs clearly did work.
This I didn't like this. This reminded me of Imhotep.
Yeah, actually, very similar.
It's just reminded me of that, and we know what Imhotep was like. So this was, apart from that interesting title screen, there's not a lot to recommend here. The fact that it goes from right to left as well is always a no in my book.
Nope.
So no, there's no magic in this monkey.
No. It got kicked in the trippy tackers, I think, that one.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's more pigsy than monkey.
Absolutely.
What we got next? All right, Spectipede.
Okay.
So we had Killapede. We had the golden axe. Now we've got the golden circles with Spectipede. Another centipede clone.
Yeah.
So it's got some clever coding for its sleeve though, with nice title screen and good presentation around the edges.
Yes, it does.
But once you start playing though, the scrolling background, like we said with CC12 games, Pod and Void Runner, make it too hard to navigate the playfield, and it's too hard to see what's going on. There's a reason Centipede works best with a black background.
Yes.
So although this does move at a pace, it's faster than Killapede. You need to be able to see what's coming at you, and all that visual frippery in the background just gets in the way. So in my estimation, Killapede may have been a bit chunkier, but it was easier to play and pass because it looked like Centipede. This is, probably better coded, but a worse game to play because of that. That makes sense.
I put exactly the same. Clearly better coded, but weirdly less playable than the other variations of Centipede we've come across. This was made by Tony Kelly, so that's the guy that made Big Mac, the maintenance man. He did make a version of that for the C16 as well, a number of others. So this is clearly on his journey on his journey to coding supremacy. But this was 1985, so quite a while ago.
Yeah, no, there you go. Not much to say about that one.
No,
all right,
no.
3 left. Bridgehead.
I thought this would be your favourite. This made me laugh for ages and ages.
Yeah, so fair play to them in trying to make a Green Beret variant for the Commodore 16. But it's lacking some basic controls. There's no jump and you can't move backwards.
Yeah.
I mean,
some fundamental things are wrong with this one.
So this limits your options somewhat. The visuals are all right. What they are, it looks, they're okay. And what controls you have kind of work, although stabbing the enemies is a massive case of trial and error. You only get one enemy at a time. So just one enemy slowly makes his way towards you down giant, massive ladders. And then hopefully you'll get your stab right. Otherwise, you're back at the beginning. I did note that ducking is the funniest thing I've seen in a while in this game. It just looks like you die immediately with your face falling on the floor. You just rotate. It just rotates the character 90 degrees. There's no attempt. It's just dunk.
Yeah, it just lays flat, doesn't he?
It was when I first did it. I was laughing for ages, and I just kept doing it for quite a while. Just that duck. It's not animation. It's just you just up, down, up. Rubbish. But yeah, this was a no for me.
No, same. It was bold in its attempt, wasn't it? It was a brave thing to try, but it failed for me when the Green Beret, when it started, wasn't actually green. And although he was wearing a beret, I suppose that's something. His stab was, I'm not sure what he was stabbing with. I forgot the feeling he went into this armed with a very small penknife, so he sort of poked more than stabbed, and then it didn't really work. And I only managed to kill a couple with the grenade before I was quickly overwhelmed with my one enemy. So they make a lot in the instructions about the fact that it's got bi-directional scrolling. In fact, that's in capital letters, like it's shouting at, this has got bi-directional scrolling, everyone bi-directional scrolling. And it consists, each 8 separate sectors contains 8 screens of bi-directional scroll. Apparently, it's bi-directional scrolling. They make a big point of that. It didn't work for me either in that way either. So I'm thinking it's just more box claims. So, and there are other enemy types. You get the dark red soldier as the bazooka guy, and the dark blue soldier is the missile guy, as well as the commander and the patrolling soldiers. It was an attempt, wasn't it? But it was small and it didn't really work.
No, it did not. But fair play to him.
Yeah,
for giving it a go.
Good try, Anko. No.
Yeah, good try. Couple left. Tutti Frutti. You enjoy Tutti Frutti?
Yeah, I thought this was all right. It's a Mr. Do clone. It's coded by Sean Southern again, so it's Mr. Chip software. The music was passable in this, but a bit kind of pitchy, so kind of your ears start to sort of, your eyes and your ears start to twitch a bit.
Yeah.
But it's a reasonably playable Mr. Do clone. Graphics were okay. You were a strawberry in this. In fact, I think you're Super Strawberry King of the Orchard is the title. You've got to collect cherries a la Mr. Do, very similar. And it works in the same way. So as you collect them, you get little sort of tones as you pick them up, and you've got things that are trying to get in your way, and you can drop heavy objects in a kind of almost a Dig Duggy Mr. Do kind of style. It's of that genus of game, and it's enjoyable because it's that genus of game. I always quite like the Mr. Do's, the Dig Dugs, and those kind of games, and it's an appropriation of those things, albeit with the limitations of the machine it's on. So I thought it was all right. All right.
Yeah, this is weird because if you get to it's almost three different games on each level. So first one is Mr. Do, the second one you have to kill the enemies, and the third level is Pengo.
Oh, there's a Pengo, and get that far into it.
Yeah, if you get to the third level, it's essentially you've got to push the blocks. So it's the same characters and stuff, but you're pushing the blocks to crush them. So it essentially becomes Pengo. So this is both Mr. Do and Pengo in one game.
Yeah, Mr. Do Pengo. It sounds like
and it worked. Both of them really good versions of both of those arcades.
Yeah, it worked. I enjoyed the bit I played, and I thought this is like Mr. Do. So, and I like Mr. Do.
Yeah, seriously, get to the third level and it's Pengo. Because at first I was like, "What's going on? This is suddenly not. I can't move into the cherries."
Let's get Sean Southern. No, the guy can code. I mean, the guy knows how to make games and code things and get the most out of the hardware he's on. I'll give credit where credit's due.
Yeah,
because he is prolific on this machine.
He really is. So for capturing getting both of those, separate modes of play into a C16 one load with multiple levels. It's nice. The graphics are nice and chunky. They're arcade-like.
I mean, we haven't looked at it in this, and maybe we'll look at it in the future. But his version of Trailblazer for the C16 is astonishing for what it is on the C16.
Well, we will at some point look at the sort of downports. So at some point,
but Tutti Frutti, it was. I think the most fun out of all of the ones I think I played. Maybe Leaper and to some extent some others, but I really like that one.
Yeah, I thought this was good. Good arcade game.
Yeah.
Final one, Astro Plumber. I think we plumbed the depths with this one.
Well, this was just plain odd, wasn't it? So this is from Blue Ribbon, and I thought they were a biscuit manufacturer or a biscuit. It's coded by Wayne Allen and Moore. It's MAW. You are a maintenance man just arrived from Earth. Your task is to repair the leaking air pipes in the caverns under the moon's surface, which supply the scientists of Colony 11, a research station. There are inhabitants of the underground caves which are indestructible, so you must avoid those. To help you avoid them, you're wearing a jetpack. Now, I would say that doesn't help you avoid anything, but okay. A jetpack in a cave is a dangerous thing, enabling you to fly over them, which it doesn't. But watch your fuel supply. Press the return key to take off and land again, which didn't really work very well for me. Anyway, so the idea is you've got to work your way around a kind of a platformy type environment, leaping over things with a jetpack, which would just put a jump in, just make it jump. And it's because you've got joystick and you've got silly keyboard controls. It's probably better controlled totally by keyboard, but not both, because I tried joystick and the return key and it was a bit faffy. It was all right, but I ran out of air pretty quick, and you lose your lives very quickly. It's not a game you're going to get very far in unless you really, really persevere with those controls. So
I didn't get on with this. I thought this reminded me of Space Panic.
Yes, actually, yeah. Thinking about it,
with the sort of original platformer, as some people call it.
Yeah,
that's what it reminded me of. You're moving up and down ladders, fixing stuff, or trying to avoid enemies and stuff. It just looked like single screen laddery nonsense.
It is, and without the inlay, it's not really clear from the first screens what the hell controls what, because it's really bitty, the sort of layout of the sort of title screen as it's such, and the sounds are quite basic in it as well. So it just felt a little bit underwhelming as a sort of an Astro Plumber's a bit weird anyway. So it seems strange that you would send a maintenance man all the way from Earth to the moon. Anyway, I don't know. I'm not going to question the logistics of it, but
no, that's not. There you go. That's our 16 for the 16.
16, yeah.
On the fourth month.
Yeah.
What did you make of that, Graham? What did you make of your time playing C16 games?
I can see that these are... There is a lot of attempts. I think you can sort of see because my question with a lot of these was where was it? They didn't know really where this machine was pitched, other than entry level. And so I think the fact that these games came out on it sort of tells you exactly that the expectations aren't going to be that high. You've got 16K and almost a crippled game. I mean, I know there's loads of other games that come out. There's even a version of Mercenary out on the C16.
Wow.
So there are some bigger titles than the ones we've played. But do you know what? It reminds me of it. It's a very sort of slight little sojourn into a different world. And the games, some of them, it goes back to that old logic of games where if you just stick to something simple but do that kind of well and iterate over that and get the logic of the game mechanic right from the start, then the games like Tutti Frutti and things like that, they just work because of that. And there's other ones in there that made me laugh. Street Olympics was brilliantly hilarious, and you don't get those kind of games. And that's the thing that did strike me about this, is that there's a kind of an adventure, not an adventure, what's the word? I suppose there's kind of a Wild West feeling about these games, is that it's a bit like, there's just a Wild West. There's just prospectors just making anything they can. Some of the ideas are going to work, some of the ideas aren't. But I like the fact that there are lots of ideas and lots of games being tried out on there, because too quickly with these platforms, when they get bigger, the games suffer from the narrowing. So you start to get the same game repeatedly created by lots of different providers. Whereas at least here, you've got loads of weird variations of stuff, albeit that we've already, even that 16, we've got 2 Centipede clones. But there's a whole variety of weird games in there that you would never normally come across. There's some of them are genuinely odd. So yeah, there's crap. Monkey Magic is just rubbish. But in amongst all of that lot, this Leaper was in there. Leaper was a good little arcade. Tutti Frutti, stick to the strength of something with 16K, I think, is my message. Yeah, I quite enjoy my time. It's very loud, a very different experience. It feels like a cut down. It felt to me like very early, when you very, very first got the C64 and you were playing games from 1982, 83, and you were also on the early Spectrum games, because it's what it is, isn't it? And so it feels like a different era from especially from what we're used to reviewing at the moment in the main sort of Zapped to the Past podcast, where we're looking at games like Last Ninja and Defender of the Crown and all those kind of stuff, and the big titles that we've been looking at, Whiz Balls and stuff. This kind of felt like a sort of refreshing single screen experience of a lot of these things. There's some decent stuff there, and it was all right. I didn't mind my time. I've never really played on the C16 before, so it just feels like I can kind of see what they're aiming for, but it came out in 1984, didn't it? The C16. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it did. If you can envisage a sort of a massive building, and all around the insides of the shelves of those buildings are the C64 games. The C16 games are the Aldi aisle of crazy in the middle. So that's the way I imagine it. That's a good analogy, yeah. So, it's just full of Aldi ideas and stuff that you might not even think could be even useful or a game. And you'll find it in the middle aisle. It's the middle of Lidl. Yeah, that's exactly where these games live, in that kind of crazy world. Yeah, you're not quite sure whatever it is you're going to experience when you fire one up. Exactly. Could be anything. So it could be good, could be bad. There you go. Yeah. There's our sojourn into just to cover what some of the games that Zap covered. So we've had a look at some of those. We hope you've enjoyed this. It's a little bit different. We won't have a normal major episode out on Monday because it's Easter, so we're taking a little break between them. What we will be releasing, though, we recorded and through our Patreon and access to our Discord, you can ask us questions and stuff. So we recorded an Ask Us Anything podcast, so we'll be putting that out on the Monday. So that's Easter Monday, that will go out. So it's something for you to listen to, and this on the Saturday. So it's a double episode weekend. It's not quite a triple episode treat, which is a shame, but that would have been good. So that's what you've got coming on thingy, and then we'll be back to our normal swathe of programming, which will be a week Monday. I can't remember what date that is. What date is that? 25th. That's when your next proper episode is Zapped to the Past will be out. But we hope you've enjoyed this. It's been fun to do. If you wish to get in on the asking us questions or any other stuff, you can do so signing up to our Patreon, which is over at patreon.com/Zapped to the Past. There are 2 tiers. It's just for £1, which just helps us keep things ticking, and you get our lifelong thanks. Or there's the higher tier price of a beer, equivalent of £4.50, which gets you access to the Discord, early access to episodes, and all the other stuff that we've got going on over there. So if you feel like it, I know that things are tight at the moment. Things are tight for everyone, but if you can spare us and help us keep going, that would be cool. I've quite enjoyed my sojourn into the C16. Been all right. Absolutely.
Anything else you wish to add, Mr.
No,
Raddings?
no, not at all. I think it's been an interesting little thing and been interesting to visit some of the bigger titles for the platform and see where we're at with those.
All right, cool. Well, on that note, I have been Adrian Mills.
I have been Graham Raddings.
And you've been listening to Zapped to the Past, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Zapped to the Past podcast. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the world of Commodore 64 games, as well as the music, films and TV from around the 1980s, driven, of course, by the issue of Zap 64 magazine published at that time. We will return with a whole new batch of games and stuff to talk about next week. Until then, if you want to listen to or download previous episodes of Zapped to the Past, and why wouldn't you, they can all be found on our website at zappedtothepast.com, as well as being available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, Audible, Player FM, and, well, pretty much anywhere where we can upload them. By the way, we do always love to hear from our amazing listeners, so if you'd like to contact us about anything in the podcast or beyond, you can do so by emailing us at zappedtothepast@gmail.com. We're also active on Twitter under @ZapTother, as well as Facebook, Instagram, and most social media platforms. Just search for Zapped to the Past and you'll find us. Oh, and if you like the podcast and what we're doing, please do like, share, review, rate us. It really helps. Something, apparently. The Zapped to the Past podcast is written and produced by Adrian Mills and Graham Raddings and recorded at FlakyBits 2.0 Studio. All opinions expressed are those of the writers, and while we indeed love Zap 64 magazine, the Zapped to the Past podcast is not affiliated with it in any way. Stay safe, see you next time, and remember, we play these games so you don't have to.